Because of our size, we never felt we really needed an attorney.
That company grew exponentially, and John was an integral part of that.
This was a very thriving company.
When you open your business day one, get a good attorney.
Little guys sometimes think they don't need one, but there comes a point where you run into situations that you just can't handle anymore, and you have to have someone in your corner to take care of those things.
He's an extremely good attorney. I mean, he's covered us, we've dealt with him now for, well over 20 years. And like I say, I just wish we would have gotten him on board sooner. Wish I would have known him sooner.
It's very fascinating how well those things go when you do have someone in your corner.
Early on in my representation of Ed and Georgette, they were contacted regarding an income tax audit. And that can be a very, very stressful time for a business owner.
Of course, they start off auditing the corporation, and then they get into auditing you personally and your kids and everything that's ever happened in your life. And so obviously whenever that happens, you're very stressed out.
Because when you own your own business, it's not just a matter of the business. They also go into all your personal stuff, and they're going back, 7 years.
And I go, John, I've got this IRS audit that started. I go, this is horrendous. They're coming in, they're interviewing my employees, they're, walking around my yard. And John goes, that should not be happening.
My background before I was a lawyer is I actually was an income tax auditor. So this is something that I'm intimately familiar with.
They get 1 day on your site. He goes, you tell them you're now represented by an attorney, and that from now on all of their meetings will be in my office, and they will ask me what they want. I will present it to you. You have 3 days to get it to them. And he goes, they're not allowed to go out to your site anymore. And I was like, oh gosh, this is great.
When you're going through a tax audit, many times you don't really understand the ramifications of what you're saying, or that they're really actually asking for issues that maybe not as clearly presented in the questions that are coming up.
He handled that very well and had no problems.
We were insured in our workman's comp by an insurance company that was actually in Pennsylvania, and they filed bankruptcy. The commissioner of Pennsylvania took over all of their claims.
We had over 225 employees, so our workman's comp was a significant part of our costs in our business.
Because of our years of experience, we had a low experience mod, which meant we got a substantial amount of money back every year from the premiums we paid on our workman's comp.
They had a very positive work experience modification. If you're a business owner, then you know what that means is it can actually provide for a reduction in your workers' compensation insurance costs, which is very, very meaningful for a business.
To lose that, would cost us between $100,000 and $200,000 every year.
In the state of California, the insurance company has to certify your losses in order for you to get your experience mod.
They refused to certify the loss experience. If you couldn't get the certification of the loss experience, then she would not be able to get a refund or reduction based upon that experience modification.
So I became slow in our payments to them.
Georgette was very specific. She said, as soon as you certify our losses, we will pay you. And they refused to do so. And in fact, they actually, and that company, interesting enough, a lot of workers' compensation insurance companies are licensed to Pennsylvania because there are laws in Pennsylvania that are very favorable for them. And so we ended up getting sued by the insurance commissioner of Pennsylvania, which was really quite interesting. And so our firm defended on that, and we also countersued for breach of contract and a breach of fiduciary obligation for failing to take care of their insured and doing what they're supposed to do under the agreement.
John represented us in that and was able to win in a countersuit we had against the state of Pennsylvania.
We were able to get their expert to actually admit on the stand that they are intentionally failing to perform their duties under the agreement, with the idea that there would be a greater overall profit by failing to go through the work experience or to do the things that they were required to do for a large number of people, knowing that very few people would fight it. Once we had that testimony completed, the case was completely done. We were actually able to get a significant refund from them. No balance due was paid, and we actually got a refund back from them because we were threatening them with punitive damages at that point based on their own expert's testimony.
A lot of lay people don't understand that, how critical insurance is to a business, particularly where we were subcontractors on large subdivision. We did large subdivision work.
In 2003, we ran into an issue where the main way of attorneys to extort money out of contractors were that everything was product liability. Any job you did, whether you had anything wrong, I mean, we did fencing, rarely was there really anything of any consequence that was involved.
Product liability was becoming a huge problem.
But the attorneys were going around suing every subcontractor that worked on a job.
Just like you see a construction industry for building new homes, I'm sorry to say, if you're not aware, there's a separate industry for construction defects. They will file a lawsuit against each and every contractor that did any work whatsoever on that development.
Because we had to indemnify all of our general contractors. Every time they were sued for something wrong with the house, every subcontractor on the job had to indemnify that contractor.
Because it was getting so onerous for the insurance company, Zurich, who represented us then.
We were with Zurich for 20 years, over 20 years in fact, and they finally said, we aren't going to do business with anyone who has more than 50 employees.
They said they would no longer write for a company doing over $5 million a year in sales.
Well, that was not our company. We had 225 employees. We were doing close to $30 million in business a year. This was at the 11th hour. Like I said, our insurance was expiring within 2 days.
One of the components in determining the cost of your liability insurance is the gross receipts for the business. The greater the gross receipts, the more business is being conducted, the higher the insurance cost. What happened with Ed and Georgette is, very much at the last hour. The insurance is coming up for renewal. They found out that that the insurance went up 4 to 5 times in terms of what the overall cost was, which was a very challenging expense to try and cover and deal with. But the other component to that came up is their deductible increased well over 10 times.
We were just devastated with what they put in front of us. We could not operate. It became that we were basically self-insured. Self-insured for a premium of $400,000 a year, $35,000 deductible first dollar defense. No one can live with that. We couldn't survive and couldn't live with that. So we did consider, are we going to have to close the doors if we didn't have a way out of this? There basically we were very between a rock and a hard place at that point.
We went and spoke to John about, was there any way of doing it? We couldn't really change our company to a company doing under $5 million a year. It wouldn't make sense at that point. It probably would have made more sense just to liquidate, and take what we could get out of it and go on.
Contacted John, told him about the situation.
They really needed to find a different solution, and it was so bad that one of their first knee-jerk reactions was possibly to shut down, to go out of business. That is how disastrous this was. And so looking through this, the approach that we ended up using is we split the company into 7 separate companies. First, what we did is we formed a company that would handle the product, so the supplies, the lumber. And so that way we actually are able to pull the receipts associated with the products or supplies outside of that mix, because the liability for buying lumber is really quite low, as opposed to actually doing construction. We have workers, pounding nails, digging holes, and the potential of getting hurt. And then what we did is we formed separate companies for the construction.
John came up with the idea of splitting the company up so that we had 6 different companies all doing under $5 million a year, insure them all with different insurance carriers, And then we were able to, continue doing the work we were doing.
What's interesting about Ed and Georgette is they were both fully and actively involved with the management and growth of the business. Both of them had contractors licenses, and that's something that they had. And so what we did is we actually were able to identify that we could use 3 separate companies under each license. So now we took this very healthy, thriving company and split into 7 separate companies.
He immediately started telling us what we had to do. We had to get, both my husband and I are licensed contractors. We could get 3 contractors' licenses each, which is something we started immediately, and he handled that because he could get it expedited through the Contractors License Board.
One that was providing supplies and product and materials, 3 under Ed's license, contractor's license, 3 under Georgette's license, and that actually allowed them to continue in business, allowed them to continue and prosper. It wasn't easy because it was all something that had to be accomplished very quickly.
We had to have those contractor's license numbers in order to get our corporate entities up and running, and then we had to be bonded, so contractor's license bonds on each one of those. And then he worked very closely with our new insurance agent to make sure that each entity had their own insurance as well.
Each company had to be an independent company, so it had to have separate employees, separate contracts, and so there was a great deal of complexity involved with that.
Basically, we broke our company up into these 7 different entities.
But this was a significant business, and this is really a second-generation business, and so this was allowing that business to continue and to thrive.
Each big contract that we had all the contracts then had to be written into each of these 7 different companies, and John facilitated all of that as well.
The customers we had, most of them we had long-term relationships with. They wanted to continue that relationship. They understood they were dealing with the same people, and so, it worked out really well.
If you were self-insured and you had to pick up first dollar defense for your attorneys, I can't even tell you. I'm sure it's in over $1 million that he has saved us right there. Probably the biggest thing that John did for us over the years was the sale of our business.
We were very concerned about potential liabilities, buyer's remorse, those sorts of things. And the other thing that was very helpful for me is for Ed and Georgette, they didn't have to sell the company. And one of the problems that I encounter sometimes is when I'm negotiating terms for a sale, and once the potential seller sees the number of zeros in the purchase price, then they no longer really focus on running the business, and they're very anxious just to get the check, and they stop really thinking about what they need to do to protect themselves and to make sure it's the very best approach. And very early on in this process, one of the things that Ed said to me is, John, I'm not entirely sure I really want to sell. It's something I'm very interested in, but if you tell me that we don't want to go forward with this, or we're not getting the terms we want, just say so. We won't continue with the sale. So that actually helped us in terms of the settlement negotiations, and we were able to achieve some very unique and very, very positive results.
And so he walked us through that whole process as well, helping us with the negotiation of the buyer. There's so much involved there. Had never been through a due diligence of anything like that, where they go back at least 3 years in your business. And you also have to, the tax returns that have to be done. And the minutia of detail would have been overwhelming if John hadn't been there to put it all in perspective, tell us this is what they're looking for.
So normally when you're selling a company, the buyer wants some representations that the work has been done properly, that the customer's going to stay with the company, the employees are going to stay with the company, all those sorts of things that a buyer may be worried about changing when they come into place. And we just flat out told the buyer that you're going to have to take it as is. We're not going to give you any representations and warranties. And in fact, we're going to say in the agreement that we're not giving you any representations and warranties. And as we went through this process, they threatened to fail to continue with the sale, those sorts of things. But nevertheless, this was a very thriving, successful company. They had a very strong position in the marketplace. And then we were actually able to get those terms in place. And then we went even beyond that.
He had a lot of clauses in there that served to protect us on the other end after the sale also.
So really the goal was here is we have somebody who's selling their company. They want to know when they go to bed at night, when they cash that check, when they're receiving those payments, that they are in fact going to get the sale proceeds, and so that they have a retirement and funds that they can count on. Instead of just getting the as-is language, we were actually able to get general releases from the buyers, so that the buyers were actually releasing any and all claims that may have happened before the sale, at the time of the sale, or related to the business, the operations, the assets, everything. And so what that means is really they were protected from everything but the kitchen sink, including the kitchen sink, regarding that sale. And that became very important later on.
As we go forward, we started discovering how much of inheritance tax we were going to incur, especially after selling our business. He worked setting it up now to have all of our money in trusts so that we can protect much more of our, our legacy money that we're going to hopefully leave to our grandkids instead of leaving it to the government.
When we work on an estate planning engagement, we're not just looking at minimizing costs and expenses and taxes and so forth. We're also trying to maintain family values and put things in place that will provide the best possible benefit for the family.
Set up our estate plan so that we can get the bulk of our estate to go to our 4 grandchildren.
Flash forward through the years, I've now assisted their son James with his estate planning plan and his asset protection plan as well, and we're able to focus those in a way so that they all work together to provide the greatest possible benefit for the children and the grandchildren, and providing a high level of asset protection as well.
My son got married in Hawaii. But both of them were California residents, so John did a prenup.
And in this case, with Ed and Georgette, they actually had a very significant family business, that there was some ownership and interest that would be flowing through to their children. And we wanted to make sure that those assets that were part of that family business and the succession of that family business stay within the family. So it was important not only for James but also for Ed and Georgette to make sure that it protects the integrity of that family business. So we put together a premarital agreement for them, for James, and unfortunately the marriage did not work out. And at the time that the marriage dissolved, they were actually living in Texas. So it was tested by the Texas courts. And as we went through that process, we, as a general rule, are very, very detail-oriented.
It's very detail-oriented, and you didn't want us to leave out anything.
In this case, the premarital agreement was tested in Texas. It absolutely held up.
Attorney for my son and the lawyers and even the judge mentioned what a very wonderful prenup my son had, that it covered so many things that many prenups don't.
Georgette and James were receiving very positive comments from the counsel that they had, from the opposing counsel, even from the judge, detailing how detail-oriented the premarital agreement was.
One of them being that you might have separate property, but an ex-wife is entitled to all of your proceeds, interest, dividends, anything that you get from the moment you're married on that money. And John was very inclusive. James's money and everything that went with it was his.
And some of the areas that can be problematic for that is making sure that you're not only just dealing with the assets themselves and making sure that those are kept segregated, but also assets that might be invested in from those earlier business assets, and also income. That's another area that can often be overlooked. Income from separate property, or even income from wages and earnings. And we wanted to make sure that we had a very, very, very strong firewall around all of the assets that really pertain to that family business. so that if there's income related to that family business or there are dividends related to that family business, all of that is and will be protected. And that's not really even just for James's perspective, because if you have a chink in the armor where somebody else has an ability to get an ownership interest in that family business, they can really wreak havoc on that business. So again, it's more than just the dollars and cents. We want to put together a plan that is going to be fully integrated, with the estate plan, so things will actually work.
James just remarried a very wonderful woman, but our son is an anesthesiologist. He has other concerns, especially with the liability that doctors are always under. And so John prepared for him an irrevocable trust before he was married, and then the prenup incorporates that irrevocable trust in that plan.
So in this case, as in many other things, planning opportunities and technologies have changed. And so the things that we're able to put into the premarital agreement that we do now, that you don't often see, that better protect James just in the premarital agreement itself. And we have a slightly different strategy as well. We actually were able to combine that with an asset protection trust. So that way James is protected and his new wife is protected, better protected from claims regarding professional malpractice, those sorts of things, or other creditor claims as well. Then layered on top of that, we actually have the premarital agreement, which references the asset protection agreement, which provides an additional level of protection for James for that and for his children. And once again, we want to put something in place so that it's fully integrated with their estate and asset protection plan.
Because of our size, we never felt we really needed an attorney, which I disagree with. People need an attorney. When you open your business, day one, get a good attorney. But so we functioned as a C-Corp for years. When
I began representation of Ed and Georgette, one of the first issues that I noticed is they had an operating business, and they also owned the land in which the business was operating from, and it was put into the same entity, which was a corporation and was also a C corporation. The problem with a C corporation is that it's double taxed. Income flows into the corporation, you pay expenses and so forth for which you get a deduction, then you have a net income and you actually pay tax at that point. Then when you distribute funds back out from the C corporation to the shareholders, then those are dividends, which are again taxable. And in some cases, that when you look at the two tax rates together, you're looking at an overall tax rate of 79%, which means you're only keeping 21 cents on the dollar, which is really not a very tax efficient system.
Paid taxes through the C Corp. Then the money we took, we paid taxes again. John reviewed it, set us up as an S-Corp, so everything flowed pretty much into just the bottom line, and it was taxed then one time as an S-Corp as our income, so a major deal.
And also, as a general rule, we do not want to have the land in the same entity as the operating business for both tax purposes and also for estate planning and asset protection purposes. If there's a problem in the business value may be affected or lost, but that you still keep the real property, and so again that would be better protected.
Back when we still had the fence company, we were having trouble finding enough space in town of Reno in order to really set up a lumber yard, and that's primarily what we did. We had a lot of lumber. So we looked out there at land, bought 5 acres, and I had actually started building the facility there before I sold my business. And so when we were building it, the whole area started growing up. Walmart built their Northern California distribution center there. PetSmart came in and built a large distribution center. And so since we were out there, we saw this going on. We bought some additional land and ended up building a warehouse for our facility that we leased. Built another warehouse, sold it to a steel fabrication plant, and then we developed 15 pads out there on one piece of property, and then just as pieces of property came up that interest us, then we bought them, and so we have a few pieces of property out there in that area.
And then also when you have a sale of the business downstream, which many times owners are not thinking about when they first form the business, but you should always be considering an exit strategy for when you're ready to move on. You can sell the business and then have another stream of income from the rental proceeds from the rental of property to the new buyers.
Tesla, which Reno worked extremely hard on, got a lot of press on them attracting Tesla and getting them out there. I mean, that plant's going to be a $5 billion plant. employ about 6,500 people. Very, very big thing for Nevada in general, but Reno Sparks, that's huge. You know, they're out there, and because Tesla came in, now we got a Apple manufacturing plant there. The largest that just came in is Switch, and that, of course, by the time it's done, is going to be more than 5 million square foot. Now they're talking about that whole facility costing over $10 billion to build, so that's a very, very major deal.
One of the other problems with a C corporation is many business owners with a C corporation, when they're faced with that double tax, decide, well, gosh, if I distribute the money out, I just pay the money in taxes. So what are we going to do? We're just going to keep the money inside the company. The IRS and the Franchise Tax Board is way ahead of you on that regard as well, because if you fail to distribute the funds out, then they can have what they call an excess retained earnings tax. So they're taxing it even if it's with a penalty because you're failing to distribute it out. Converting it to an S corporation got us off the hook regarding the excess retained earnings, so now we no longer had an issue with that. And then also we're able to currently distribute income out from the company on an ongoing basis without that double tax structure, which gave them a great deal of flexibility. One of the downsides of an S corporation election is because of that tax savings, the IRS will have what they call a built-in gains tax, so that if the business is sold or transferred within a 10-year period of time, they're going to be taxing you on any of the appreciated assets for which you save tax on the conversion. It's interesting how it turned out. When we flash forward 10 years, they actually were selling their business. We timed the sale of the business to close 2 to 3 weeks after the expiration of that built-in gains tax period. And so it allowed us a planning opportunity, and it provided a very, very substantial tax savings for them overall.
And it did when we sold our business, was a huge tax savings.
You don't realize how many times that you could really use an attorney, and if you're going to ever need the attorney, you need a good one. He's an extremely good attorney. I mean, he's covered us, you know, we've dealt with him now for, you know, well over 20 years. And like I say, I just wish we would have gotten him on board sooner. Wish I would have known him sooner.